Okay, we're going to get started. Thanks to those of you that were able to stay. I think this is actually going to be a great wrap-up panel. Hopefully we'll put a nice bow on all of this and talk about next steps. I do have one announcement. Unfortunately, Kish did need to leave. He was called back to deal with some legislative items. As you know, the governor's office right now is very active and busy, which is good, but unfortunately he gives his regrets. I have asked, though, instead, Gregory Thiel to sit in, and instead of giving just a state of California perspective, I'm going to ask Gregory to start in a minute here and talk more about the global perspective. As many of you know, Gregory hails from work over at Cambridge and can kind of give a perspective of what's going on in the UK, and then obviously Gregory's work here now. Each of the panelists is going to take a few minutes and kind of take us from the macro to the micro, talking, well, as Gregory will, about global, and then we'll come down into what the laboratories are up to and then what the MEPs are up to, and then we'll be able to open up and talk with questions and whatnot. Part of their framework that they'll be talking about, though, just so you can have a context, is to talk about what are we doing within CNMI? What was this all about today? What are we trying to accomplish? So you'll hear some of those contexts as well. With that, Patrick, do you want to start off and just give a brief opening, and then we'll flip to Gregory and come back?
We have a couple slides there. If you want to pull those up. I spoke a little bit about this at the reception last night. So for those of you that were there, this will be a little bit of a repeat. Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory has been in the business of manufacturing since the 50s. It's been for a specific customer in the Department of Energy, so we don't talk about it a lot, but things are changing. The focus before was on products. The focus now is on process, and a lot of those processes we've been talking about today. And so, like we have been doing in the past, and like the Department of Energy has encouraged Lawrence Livermore to do in the past, is as it develops technology within the laboratories, is to think about how to get that out into industry. But it usually happens after the fact, after we've created a product for the government. Then we look at their intellectual property and try to find companies who are willing to bridge that gap and get it out in industry in some way. And we've got lots of success stories in that regard, and it is a good model. But we felt in this particular case, it wasn't a good model. We needed to do this faster. We need to come up with a way to start innovating for our customer with industry in mind. And that's when we began working with many of you all, and particularly the folks at this table, the MEPs in California, because the manufacturers that we were dealing with in the industry and the supply chain we were dealing with was not necessarily California, not necessarily industry at large, and so we needed their help, and that quickly became the idea for a collaborative, and this was just a little over, maybe a little under a year ago, the idea to bring technologies out of the laboratories, or technologies are being developed at the laboratories, and begin working collaboratively with industry, technologies that are being developed at universities, educational programs, work that's being done with economic development agencies, work that's being done in the federal government, and particularly the work that our federal government is doing through the NIST MEPs in helping manufacturers become more competitive. This developed over time. What's happened is this idea of regionally focusing our regional assets has gained a lot of steam, and there's a lot of universities and a lot of and the laboratories and a lot of manufacturers interested in making this happen. And the state of California at the same time got involved in our effort. It said, we're thinking about the same thing. We're actually in the middle of putting together an idea for another iHub related to manufacturing. You guys ought to think about that. We still kept going full steam ahead on what we were doing, and began working with the state of California a little bit closer. And now we're in the process of thinking about turning this whole idea into and combining it with the state's ideas as an iHub. And we think everything we've done sort of has that alignment with what the state's objectives are and what you heard Kish talk about earlier today. We were hoping to have Louis Stewart as part of this panel because he's been part of what we've done and part of developing this idea. over the next few weeks, we'll be talking about structure and how we make this work. This is just my take at our conversations of how a structure might look. Really, in the bottom there is the resources, is the capabilities of the universities, the national labs, large private enterprise, counties and cities, community colleges, and the VC community. You know, met Jeffrey Doyle, who's trying to get things going in the VC community in the South Bay. And taking those resources and ideas and assets and creating tools that will bring this to industry, help in particular the small and medium-sized enterprises that are in California that really don't have the time to spend a whole day here. And if you have and you are, we really appreciate, we understand that's a valuable asset of yours, the most valuable asset. But then to bring these tools, perhaps through research centers, startup incubators, educating the educational system so that they're bringing employees to you, and events and networks such as this. And then connecting that to industry in a way that is easy, and that's what the NIST MEPs are all about. That's what our economic development organizations are all about. The whole purpose of this is to create growth, and particularly in California, and particularly with small to medium enterprises. That's conceptual. If we were to create a structure around this, which we'll have to do, we would see some element of a board of directors that could administer this, creating a collaborative nonprofit that would sort of epitomize this, creating direction and guidance from an industry council of small and large manufacturers, service providers, and the manufacturing customers themselves who are driving the supply chain needs, and doing this perhaps in these kinds of tranches where we do outreach, education, research centers, startup incubators, and events, as I mentioned on the previous slide. That's the idea. We're in the forming stages of this. We were really looking for your support, your ideas, your vote of confidence, and part of that is this event. This was the first event we really put together as a collaborative to get you all here and so you can hear about some of the things we're hearing about and get this networking going and really get this whole process moving. So we don't plan to slow down. We plan to speed up, and we can use your help. Those are my words. Next.
Those are great words.
Oh,
What?
good.
I haven't lost you. With those words, why don't we ask Gregory to come up and give us a little bit of a global context. Gregory, as I said, has had some experience not only here but internationally. So if you could maybe put it all into that context, please.
Great, thank you, Rob. My name is Gregory Thiel, and I'm visiting from the Institute for Manufacturing at the University of Cambridge. And what we've done at Cambridge might be a model that could help you. And so let me offer that as an invitation to give you insight on what we've done there. My colleagues have been at this for about 15 years. The University of Cambridge has a strong research base, and so they had lots of really interesting, cool things that they were inventing in their labs. They also had smart students from all over the world. But about 15 years ago, Mike Gregory, who's our director, he said, this isn't enough. I need a center that pulls together not just the research and the students, but brings in companies. And not just brings in companies to sign agreements and then take the technology away, but actually a center where companies can come in and actually co-develop things with our students and with our researchers. And so he started the Institute for Manufacturing, and it's been about 13 years since we got our first big chunk of money from the federal government, and we're now self-sustaining. And we do three things there. One is we continue the research. A lot of it applied research. There are probably about 100 on staff, either faculty or research associates, who conduct research on manufacturing subjects, sustainability, processes, photonics, additive manufacturing, a full range of different manufacturing techniques. We still have all of our students, But the third piece is the real piece that I think makes our institute special, and that is a group of industrial fellows who Mike Gregory has hired. There are about 50 of those, and they are intermediaries. They are folks who go out to the business community and they help our companies with a whole range of activities. And we have about 350 companies that are subscribers to our institute. They pay an small annual fee. Small companies pay it comparable to about $6,000 or $7,000. The largest companies a bit more. But we bring in about $10 million a year through project work. So companies will come to us with a challenge. They'll know we have some expertise in it. We'll have some equipment. They'll get a chance to use it, and they co-develop new ideas around their problems. We also send the fellows out, and they help with all the way from strategic planning and marketing and finding money, but that inroad then leads them to an understanding of technology capabilities and needs. And so technology really flows in both directions in many cases. So we really bring those together. Mike also established a Cambridge Enterprise Office that allows us to handle intellectual property issues. That's been really critical, and that staff, when people come to Cambridge Enterprise, they don't get a message that says, oh, well, you'll have to go to this office and this office and this office. No, they get one staff that helps them with IP issues for the university. And that's really essential. Another thing that Mike did is he set up an incubator. We have about 100 companies there at any one time. Many of them spin-outs from professors and students at the university, but then we look to scale those up through our industrial partners. And then the third thing that Mike's done is he's developed this concept of an alpha factory, an opportunity for you to come as a company and try out the equipment. And he's lined up a number of vendors who come in and put their equipment there. And so it's a chance for small and medium-sized companies in particular, but all companies really, to come there, try out the equipment, maybe buy the equipment. That makes the vendors happy. Co-develop it, or as they call it, user innovation or demand-driven innovation right in this Alpha Factory. So those are probably the big things, the Alpha Factory, the incubator, and the one-stop shopping for intellectual property. Those are some of the key things, as well as the industrial fellows who are the intermediaries. So that's really our model, part education, part research, but the big part that I really like and that's really novel for me is the interface with companies and industry. And so, like I said, if I can help in any way while I'm here, a number of the colleagues have been very kind to welcome me in and show me the region, including Rob. And so, if I can help any of the companies or any of the organizations, please let me know.
Thank you, Gregory. And the reason that I wanted him to come up and talk is in our earlier meetings with CNMI, as we were sitting down and talking about what does this organization try to look like, Gregory was very informative about some, again, 15 years of experience and what those contexts might be for us. I wanted you to hear that. Gene, why don't you come up and talk a little bit about your perspective and how you see this evolving?
Slides. So what I wanted to do was talk a little bit about the perspective from the small, medium-sized manufacturers that the manufacturing extension centers work with, of which there's 2 in California. There's one in Torrance, CMTC, which is led by Jim Watson, and then ours is over in San Ramon, and I'm the head of that group. And there's 58 other centers throughout the country. So every state has 1 or 2. Some states have 4 or 5. For example, Pennsylvania has, I believe, 5. One of the things that my perspective is being on the, feet on the street with the manufacturers that we work with. So we do about 60 to 70 major projects a year in the small, medium-sized space. And we touch about 200 Northern California manufacturers a year. In fact, one of our good friends, Sandeep Dugal, is here, and he's a manufacturer actually in a concept called last mile manufacturing, and it's a very intriguing concept in terms of bringing back manufacturing to the U.S. And it's basically customization of things that are produced in least cost countries. But I wanted to make sure that if you're interested in that concept, go to Extron's website, and you can also say hello to him while he's here. So let's see. So sort of the key takeaways that we've already talked a little bit about. I mentioned a couple of these. This comes from the McKinsey Group. Manufacturing contributes disproportionately to trade and exports. And the fact that in the study that McKinsey did in November 2012, which you should download and read, is that manufacturing is not monolithic. And the distinction between manufacturing and service is blurring. And you can see that in our discussion today, that you're dealing with a lot of software, a lot of computers, things that you think of in terms of an office, a service type of job. So when we talk about manufacturing touching jobs, we see the component of the service jobs changing. These new manufacturing industry technologies are adding what would be characterized as service jobs in some of our national data. So in developed economies, manufacturing contributes to as much as 90% of private R&D spending. The interesting thing on my panel was Microfabrica. You could see how much R&D they're doing in medical surgery and what that takes to get done, and it's pretty incredible. Earlier, I noticed Buck was laughing when I said California isn't cheap, so we better be meaningfully different, and that's tech and innovation. And tech and innovation is going to get us there where we need to go. But I can tell you that today, despite some of the glowing reports of where we're going, we're not there yet. California manufacturing is actually in pretty bad shape. The manufacturers that we deal with have gone through about a 7-year recession. Their balance sheets are in poor condition. A lot of them are unbankable and are looking for other alternative sources of credit. And the MEP program, to a large degree, half of our work is reactive, trying to save jobs, prevent plant closures in this environment. So my message as a CNMI founding member, along with CMTC, is, as I've said to many groups, we need to rebuild what we have. And if you look at the McKinsey report, the United States still leads the world in regional processing, in global innovation for local markets, and in energy or resource-intensive commodities. So let's break that down into the real world. Regional processing is food. We have a heck of a lot of food in Northern California. So in terms of working with our manufacturers and adding technologies and rapid prototyping and giving them robotics, we need to make sure that these guys don't go anywhere. Because food is really rarely outsourced to Asia or a least cost country, although it is happening in powdered milk and in frozen seafood because of containerization. Containerization obviously drives everything along with least cost labor. So we have to work as a state to protect what we have. And global innovation for local markets. If you read the McKinsey report, that's Tesla. So that's typically transportation, trucks, buses, then those are made in the Bay Area. Not to a large degree, it's one of the weaker areas for the Bay Area. It's much stronger in Southern California. But we need to reach out to that industry, protect it, make sure it doesn't do something we call outstating. So when Governor Perry comes here, he can't attract somebody to go out of state. And then finally, energy and resource-intensive commodities. Those are the guys we love to hate. Those are the guys up here making us gasoline. That's a huge industry. It's not going overseas. It's just not offshoreable. Chemicals, petroleum, coke. So we need to figure out a way to use laboratory technology, university technologies to lower their footprint, their carbon footprint, and their environmental damage that they typically do and that we're always talking about. They're important to California manufacturing. Chevron is a multi-billion-dollar company that could be a key partner of the CNMI, and they are a manufacturer. And then secondly, build for the future. Don't do number 2 first, where we're talking about major advanced technologies. Let's rebuild what we have and then build for the future. So why CNMI? Because technology transfer is a linchpin enabler for California for manufacturing resurgence. Secondly, it looks good on paper, but requires massive effort. I love the concrete sculpting, printing home, and I'm sure it will happen, but we know that getting that to market and getting it to displace other technologies is going to be a huge effort, and it takes teamwork. I say emulate the Berkshire Hathaway investment thesis, and if you've read his biography, you know what that is. You put the snowball on the hill, It's really a small snowball, and you start rolling it down the hill. So I think we're on a 20 to 30-year trajectory to rebuild manufacturing in this state, and we have to start somewhere. So let's start building that snowball. Technology transfer requires a lot of support. When you look at the small, medium-sized manufacturers, they have to deal with a lot of things before they can bring in a new technology. You might have the latest and greatest thing, but they have to think about how they're going to finance it, how they're going to deal with regulatory agencies, how they're going to get people trained to use it. So these are all the things that they think about. And that's why I think CNMI is a very good effort, because it networks everybody together. It's a little different than the outline that Patrick showed in terms of a support structure. These are what I would see are the necessary networks of people that are going to have to work together and put aside sort of, you know, different politics or policy. Everybody's going to have to work together, whether it's elected officials, economic development, the manufacturers, the trade associations. There's just so much that it takes to get things done. And if you travel in a country that's really growing, that's really sort of driving the process, you will see this. You will see in the Far East many groups working together and building on a success. Small successes give big successes, and it just keeps snowballing, and it creates a lot of excitement about what you're doing. And one of the things that is missing in the United States is that can-do attitude, because we've been, you know, looking at this being outsourced for so long. So that's a very important part. And then finally, I'd like to thank you. The stickers outside we made as a part of our manufacturing extension, Make It in America. A little stealth thing on the bottom is our website. We'd invite you, if you're a manufacturer, to join our Made in California directory. It's a networking group. It's a source of leads in business. It'll eventually roll up into the NIST Make It in America website, so that you can gain exposure for your small business or your service company. If you're doing rapid prototyping services, you should be on there. And that's pretty much it. I think we got a lot of work to do, and I think this is an important cause.
Thank you very much, Gene. And Jim, why don't you come round out the conversation?
Well, Gregory's giving you the global side of it. Patrick's kind of giving you the structure. Gene's giving you the why. I'm going to give you a little bit about the mission and the objectives of CNMI. Having worked in a number of collaboratives, it doesn't get real until you all get together and start talking about it and put something on a piece of paper. And last December, we all kind of sat down and figured out, with a very disparate group in a room, what were we going to do. We all had been chatting about trying to make manufacturing in California better, but we were just chatting. And so we all got together and we started talking about where are we going to go with it, and the first thing we had to do was come up with what the mission is. And so if you look, the mission is to drive innovation leadership in the manufacturing sector. That's kind of platitudinous, but really when you get down to the mission itself, how can we deliver on this? Because when you look at like global competitiveness and foster innovation, those are outcomes. But what do we have to do to actually deliver on this mission? The first thing we have to do is advocate for manufacturing. Because I know over the last 2.5 years, I've had a team on the road in Southern California talking to all of our partners about manufacturing. I'm talking about the workforce investment boards, I'm talking about universities, colleges, EDCs, economic development groups, and many of them got it. Many of them understood what manufacturing was all about. Many of them were a little bit in the dark about it. And so we made sure that they understood exactly how many manufacturers were in their community, exactly the fact that these are high-paying jobs, and they're multipliers. Every manufacturing job is 2.5 to 3 other jobs. When you start talking start talking like that to a partner of yours, they really perk up and want to talk about manufacturing. So what else do we have to do to deliver on this mission? The second thing we have to do is convince small and medium-sized manufacturers. You're here, you may be already convinced to talk about it, to actually enable innovation and growth. I came from small manufacturing. I understand how hard it is for a small manufacturer to think about innovation and growth. We're typically a heads-down group. We're worrying about customers. We're worrying about get the order out. What we've got to do as the MEPs, and Gene and I have talked about this, is how do we get manufacturers, the small manufacturers, to raise their head up off the day-to-day operation and literally think about their future, and to think about innovation and to think about growth. And that's our mission. I mean, we've always done real well on the cost side of working with manufacturers. We now have to get on the growth side of manufacturing and give them profitable growth. The other thing we need to do is make sure that we facilitate the product that creates a new customer and a new market for them, because that's the outcome of what CNMI is all about. We have to connect developers with small and medium-sized manufacturers. And lastly, we can certainly help the state implement their agenda as well. It seems the state has really taken a much higher profile on manufacturing recently. They were one of the very first people we visited 2 years ago about manufacturing. And we've been following them all along, and it's been kind of like the snowball going down the hill. It's gaining momentum, and I'm very pleased to where it is today. And the March 27th meeting is an indication that advanced manufacturing is a very big part of the state of California's agenda. So let's talk a little bit about the objectives. First of all, it's all about transferring technology to a proactive manufacturer. So what is a proactive manufacturer? That is one that's early adopting. Now, when Kish was here, he said there's 47,000 manufacturers in California. The National Governors Association says that 20% of manufacturers are actually involved in innovation on a continuous basis. So that means already in the state there are over 8,000 manufacturers who are interested in doing something around innovation and growth. And that's if we don't really convince anybody else to do anything. Now, to put that in perspective, 8,000 manufacturers is more manufacturers than most states have in their entire state. So when we're talking about the dynamics of getting this rolling, the fact that we can start moving that to 9,000 and 10,000 is actually make a big difference in the state in terms of a thriving manufacturing community. The second objective would be to improve the process for transferring technology. No one I've talked to is happy with the way technology gets transferred from the developer to the manufacturer, and particularly the small and medium-sized manufacturer. That it's generally, I don't want to say kismet, because that really doesn't mean that there was any work done to it, but there is generally, it's not a repeatable process and it's not a scalable process. And what we have to do is to turn the transfer of this technology into a repeatable, scalable process to get it to manufacturing. And then we need to engage partners committed to developing technology for manufacturing. Certainly, this is a totally inclusive group, but it's all about manufacturing. It's in the name. And so we want to really focus our energies on those organizations that are really focused on manufacturing. The whole organization could be doing a number of different things, but if they've got a central part of their organization that's focused on manufacturing, we want to have them as part of our collaborative. There's some secondary objectives that go with our primary objective, and it has to do with two things. First of all, workforce development and expanding resources. What's going to happen if we start pushing a lot of innovation and growth into the manufacturing community? They're not going to have the workforce to support it. Right now, we know that there's workforce gaps in many, many areas of machine operators, engineering. Basic skills is problem solving are issues that really confront most small and medium-sized manufacturers right now. So we've got to work with industry to figure out what are the skills that are needed today and what are the skills that are needed for tomorrow. And we've done a couple of surveys to figure out what that is. And now we're reconnecting back with the community colleges and universities to figure out how can we adjust the curriculum to meet not only the current needs, but the future needs of manufacturing. Then we need to engage other collaboratives. I think when Patrick was talking about, and you saw his flow chart, there was a number of different organizations and collaboratives that are possible. The government the federal government, in terms of supplying funding, sent a message out, 2.5 to 3 years ago that said, 1 in 2 people getting together to go after funding isn't going to work. You have to have broad and deep collaboratives in order to secure funding for the state. And so our goal is to go out and take CNMI and be inclusive to bring as many folks as we need into the organization to get the dynamics that we need to take advantage of this manufacturing kind of renaissance that's going on in terms of the federal government, in terms of supplying money. Regardless of sequestration, there will be more money for manufacturing over the next 2 years. So we need to take advantage of that, and the only way we're going to do it is being inclusive as an organization. And then combine research and development efforts. What you see today is a result of us combining efforts. We would have never had this, you would have never been here, if an MEP and a lab hadn't gotten together to combine what we thought was important to the state. So the more we can get the synergies, the better off we're going to be. Then basically at the end of the day, CNMI is really all about reinvigorating manufacturing in California. It's a statewide program. This isn't about Northern California or Southern. It's not about Orange County, San Diego. It's not about the Bay Area. It's about California. We have to make sure that our collaborative represents the entire state. It's built to be an inclusive organization. That's the way it has to be. We want everybody who thinks they have relevance to the organization to participate. They will self-select out if it doesn't prove to be something that they'd like to participate in. We have to keep focused on the technology developer and the small and medium-sized manufacturer. It's very easily in these collaboratives to get distracted. We can't. Those are the two things that make it work. And the last piece is the $64,000 answer to the question, which is building that bridge between the developer and the manufacturer. We have to catalog the high potential technology that the developer has. We have to build a communication network between the developer and the manufacturer. Sometimes there's different language going on. So we have to make sure they understand it. Then the MEPs have to go out and find those proactive manufacturers that can take on the technology, turn it into products, turn it into new jobs, and turn it into new customers, and turn it into more exporting. So if we keep it a statewide program, we keep it inclusive, we focus on technology developers and SMMs, and we build that bridge, we will be doing the right thing for the state of California. There's no question in my mind. Thank you.
Before I open up for general questions, which I'm sure there are plenty of, I wanted to take a moment and talk about two successes the state has had recently that demonstrate this kind of reason for collaboration. Those of you that are following the sequestration and how it rolls forward, you saw the recent email from EDA. You saw how they're encouraging not only having cross-sectorial partnerships and having built up an opportunity that's much more broad than just regional these days. And in fact, they're talking about even interstate. But there's a real push, and I think demonstrated already by two wins here in California. First and foremost, I want to talk about the AMP grant, which Gregory now is the program manager for. So Gregory, maybe in 2 minutes you could talk about what it is, what the collaborative looks like, and what it's going to achieve.
Thank you, Rob. I really mean that. Thank you for giving me time like this to talk about two really important things. The AMP grant, and I can take no credit for putting together the proposal and winning it. Julie Sinai and Tiff and Karen Engel and Randy Tillery and Mark Martin, a number of other people actually wrote it, and it's made up of probably 4 big tasks. The first is to know who's out there in advanced manufacturing. Who's developing which aspects of the value chain. I'm working with Gene on this, and we're trying to pull apart the value chains of different companies, trying to identify where they do different things, where they have people do different things. And if there are gaps, because someone here in California isn't doing that, why is that, and could we help fill that gap by letting people know there's an opportunity and even attracting companies. So this first idea is an idea of a connectory, bringing companies together along a value chain or supply chain. That's number one. Number two is just what Jim was talking about connecting research to companies, especially small and medium-sized companies. And so we've begun a cataloging effort. Betsy and Julie Sinai and a number of really smart people have been sharing their technology with me and trying to explain it to me. And then the other half of the equation is to work with people like Gene and the Small Business Development Center and connect with companies and try to play this role that they play in the UK where we have these industrial fellows. Gene and I are going to try to do that with his networks and connect companies, especially small and medium-sized companies, to the expertise of Lawrence Berkeley, Lawrence Livermore, Sandia, and other places of great research. So that's number 2. So number 1 is the connectory, 2 is connecting the research to the companies, and then 3 is helping these companies take ideas and scale them up. And again, that's lots of things for Jim and Jean to do. But Jim and Jean and the Small Business Development Center, they're going to be helping companies scale up their concepts and inventions into producible products. And so that's the third. And then the fourth, and if Mark Martin's still here, he's leading the effort with workforce development with the community colleges. And so what we're doing is we're trying to get the needs and understanding from companies about what kind of skills they need, and then look forward, reading some of the sources that Jean just talked about, try to understand the skills that we need in the future, and then customize some programs at the community college, university levels, and internship program levels to train people for this workforce for the future. So a connectory, connect research to companies, help those companies scale up, and then finally build that workforce. So that's what the AMP grant's about, and it's a pilot. It's focused up here in the Bay Area, and we're going to show them how it can work with a lot of help from people, and then that'll lead into something much bigger. First the state, and then the country, and then the world.
There's the global perspective again. The second one that I wanted to mention is a recent win in the I6 Challenge Grant. UC Davis and a collaborative out of that area, including other universities, economic development agencies, technology collaboratives, and innovation hub called SARTA, all went together and won around agriculture. You heard a little while ago how agriculture is going to be an important aspect for the state of California, even going forward. So yet we have 2 wins, both out of the federal granting system, and both around large collaboratives. So I think that's the theme you keep hearing through this. The thing I'd like to do now is to open up for questions for the audience of our panelists. We have about 25 to 30 minutes before we have to wrap up. So with that, any questions? Don't be shy. Let's go right there in the middle.
I think this question is probably for Jim. Jim, you mentioned the national effort going on for manufacturing innovation, and I know that at least before the election, there was supposed to be $1 billion available for setting up 15 regional innovation centers. So is the effort in California looking at that? So I guess that's the question.
Well, I think it's not being driven by that. It's being, this collaborative.
Mike, Jim.
Testing. Okay. What you're talking about is the NNMI kind of innovation centers that are being, what the president talked about in his message, State of the Union, and is being funded by multiple agencies, and it looks like that these will be coming out sometime in late spring. It's a great byproduct of what could be happening to this collaborative, but it's not the reason why this collaborative is together. This collaborative is together because we want to do the right thing for the state of California. And there are many other potential opportunities for funding to drive this that doesn't have anything to do with NNMI. So, you know, we're forming because we all believe and are passionate about bringing back manufacturing in the state. And NNMI would be something down the line that would be very interesting. But realize what they look for is a proven collaborative. It's a group that is mature. It's a group that they're not investing in building something. They're investing in implementing something. So, you know, we want to get this going. And you know, if it comes, it comes. If it doesn't, we're still going to be doing this.
Next question.
May I add to that, please? Just quickly.
Absolutely, sure.
I want to support Jim on that because in the UK, Mike Gregory didn't have any money and said, this is really important. Manufacturing matters for the United Kingdom, so I'm going to build this. And eventually the companies came and then the money came. And so what Jim's saying is right on as far as what's happened in the UK. It took some time, but the concept is what matters and really implementing that concept.
The ideas that you presented seem to be a little bit, how can I say, generic or general, and it's hard to understand in particular what's happening in this sphere. You know, for example, there's an entrepreneur who has an idea and he wants to implement it in practice and get financing and you know, get help from the national labs or anybody else out there. And did it actually happen? Do you have role models? Do you have examples? Or it's still in the thinking, you know, forming stage?
So that's a very good question, and it's one that the MEPs deal with a lot because we do serve the small, medium-sized companies. And I would say that on the financing side, you know, the old adage of, you know, you have to, friends and family, and you have to bootstrap yourself, I think is still the core way that things get financed in the United States, and particularly in California. So I think what we're trying to do here really is not address the capital structure, although we'd like to bring in some VCs, we'd like to bring in some sources of capital, but the first step is to connect technology to small, medium-sized companies that are currently in production or operating. So that's the initial effort. But as you could tell by both my chart and by Patrick's chart, is that the VC community is going to be an important part of this effort. And I would add on the biosciences grant that Gregory spoke about, we will involve the VC community there as well. And that's a part of the grant process for the biosciences cluster, which we're now calling AM2 PED, but I believe we're going to rename it because no one can figure out what that is. But it is a jobs cluster. It's a part of the Advanced Manufacturing Jobs Initiative of the Obama administration.
So let me try to address your question as well, and then you can see if we've covered enough of it. I think one problem I've heard talked about is that I think there's an expectation that these laboratories have some hidden assets that you don't know about that are going to save your company. Maybe some people don't believe that, but I think there's a lot of people thinking that there's intellectual property that's just on the shelf, and if they could just get in the gates and get access to that, they could start up a company and they'd have success. And there are success stories like that, but I don't think it was that easy. And I think in more cases, it's not even that. I don't think this is going to be easy. I think that creating this collaborative is going to be a little bit mushy. It's going to be getting people like this together to talk about what the next idea is. It's going to be getting this laboratory to start working with creative people. I mean, I'm going to go back to Scott Summit again because he's just so inspiring to me. And when I brought a group of scientists out to San Francisco and saw his, you know, he mentioned we're walking into his laboratory or his studio. We don't have studios here, we have laboratories, and what are we going to think? Well, what I thought was, boy, there's creativity in this studio that's completely different than the creativity that's happening in this laboratory. Put those two things together and something wonderful might happen. We're not used to doing that. How do you make that happen? It's not something you put in an RFP. It's not something you just create. I mean, and it's going to be hard. It's going to be something that's going to be created out of us working together, hearing each other talk, throwing these ideas out in panels like this, hiring one another, working with one another. It's going to be hard. I think what I heard you say is this frustration of just how do you put these labs and universities to work to really help companies, and I don't think it's easy. I think it takes work like this.
And in fact, if I could take 1 second and actually share a success story, because I think that's what you asked for. What's on the ground? Are the Dreambox guys still here? No, unfortunately. And Julie, this registers with you. Dreambox is a set of UC Berkeley students that came up with an idea out of the entrepreneurial group there, went into Skydeck, developed their idea, needed to develop a full prototype, went over to iGate here locally, and then interacted with Lawrence Livermore and the additive manufacturing folks on how to really scale up their technology. And their technology is relatively simple. It's really just taking a 3D printer and making it into a kiosk machine where you can actually send your cloud-driven schematics, and then it'll print out, and like a Kinko's, you get your product from that machine. So it's really literally the next evolution of making it completely real. But But the reality is these individuals, these small companies, young entrepreneurs, got help from UC Berkeley, they got help from Lawrence Berkeley, they got help from iGate, and then they got help from Lawrence Livermore, all for free. All of that was given to them as a way to move that technology forward. So there are real-life examples happening right today of where companies, in this case a student-run company, have been able to have those access points, and those are open for everyone.
So I'm here representing my university, and I was wondering what is the systematic way of involving universities? For example, I didn't see the name of USC there in your slides, Patrick. But we have been very active in manufacturing research.
I'll let Jim answer that question because he's working directly with USC. But Patrick and I were just discussing the fact that I want to make sure everybody realizes that we're just starting that snowball that I referenced. We're just starting the process. So we've been working on this on nights and weekends and evenings, trying to get this collaborative idea together. And some of us have come up with great ideas. Rob is one of them. He's come up with super ideas, funding ideas. Others of us, like myself, would tend to be cutting and pasting paper. So, it just depends on how much time we've had. So USC is extremely important. We're very open, but we're just getting started. So we're open to all kinds of ideas.
Actually, USC has been one of the core members of CNMI from day one. Deion Jackson from the university has been involved. And is Deion here? I don't see. Deion, there she is. She's been involved in just about everything we've been doing. We're very excited about this. We hope to have another event in the future that's in Southern California, hopefully around USC. So USC is a major piece of this right now, and very helping us in the formative stages of it. So you're in the game with us already.
Well, and the other secret is I'm actually a Trojan, so fight on. Yes, please.
Thank you. I have a question about, and suggestion I'd like to make also is that one of the roles I think that the CNMI could fulfill over here is there's already, I think, a lot of manufacturing that's been offshored based on assumptions that were true in the 80s but are no longer true. So, for example, people never really expected that all this offshoring was going to result in as much technology transfer as it did. There's a hidden cost to offshoring, in other words. Secondly, exchange rates, transportation rates, so many other things have changed that there's actually a certain class of manufacturing that is already economical to do onshore. And moreover, that kind of manufacturing fits really well with the labor forces, with the labor force that we have available right now, which is not highly skilled in additive manufacturing. So I just wanted to make the pitch that I think educating government and large industry to the fact that there's already things that we can do today because the assumptions of the 80s and 90s are long gone. We're in a new economic world right now with wages equalizing and a lot of other economic changes, which much too long to go into right now.
Just an answer to that, I think it's a great ad. The MEP program itself has been looking at the nearshoring, onshoring, what is many terms for it. I actually sit on a grant from MEP to work on the total cost of ownership calculator, which will be used to show and demonstrate to manufacturers when the crosshair is between doing something offshore and bringing it back here and doing it. So we're out testing it right now. Harry Mosier, who I think maybe nobody really knows about Harry, but Harry's been the real advocate for onshoring for many years and actually got the White House's ear on this as well. He'll be in Southern California with the supply chain managers next month to further emphasize just what you're saying, that there is an opportunity for us to go out and talk to manufacturers about bringing stuff back at the appropriate time. For some manufacturers, it's not appropriate. For others, it is. So we just got to let them know exactly when it is appropriate, when it isn't.
Right here.
So I have another ad you may want to consider to look at for a model is would be MIT's Media Lab for technology transfer. They actually, it's very much like this Cambridge model, but they actually, if you belong to the Media Lab as a business, they proactively reach out to you with things that you might be interested in what's going on in the Media Lab. And they focus the things that you're interested in, and they bring you in and actually get access to the professors and the technology and stuff like that. So for technology transfer, it's excellent. It's any university thing I've been involved in, that's the best one I've seen to date is the Media Lab. Because I've tried to work with Stanford, and even UC Davis is starting to do more things like that, but it's just not as fluid as that model is. So it's something to think about. The question I had, though, is, I don't know if it was Betsy or Patrick, at the beginning of the meeting, you talked about you're setting up an off-site or an out-of collaboration. Could you expand more about what that's going to be?
So Buck Kuntz, who's still here, didn't mention that as part of his title, or I didn't, but when he was brought into this laboratory, one of the main purposes was to create what we call Livermore Valley Open Campus. The name probably tells you what it is. Lawrence Livermore has typically been a very insular organization because of the work that it does. A lot of the work is classified. So you had to come in through a badge office and a set of gates to get here, which is inconvenient if you're a collaborator. And it makes it inconvenient for us to work with others as well. Turns out a lot of the work is now not classified. Most of the work that happens inside these gates doesn't need to be inside these gates. And so we're working to bring these gates in, and we're working to build more collaborative space. And so this open campus concept is actually a partnership between this lab and Sandia National Laboratory right across the street, who we've typically partnered with in other mission spaces, to create both spaces and collaborative efforts, working much more with industry. It's part of my job, it's part of Buck's job to help connect this laboratory much better with industry and try to connect that divide that I think some of the questions have been getting at as to how do you get the technology out of this laboratory into the hands of industry, and maybe better yet, how do you just have this laboratory work much closer with industry so that we learn together?
Time for 2 more questions. Yes, right here in the middle.
I just wanted to first thank the whole team for all their work putting this together today. I'm just tickled pink. I've been in manufacturing in California, and in fact, in the Bay Area. Yeah, I'm entering my 5th decade. I've seen changes. I've worked in small companies and large companies. I think what you're trying to do, connecting the developer with the manufacturer, is a good thing, but I'm not sure that that's enough. You talk about the decline in financial performance over the last few years, and you look at this area, it's an expensive area. Your line that you used, if you're not meaningfully unique, you better be cheaper. There's a limit to how unique you can be to offset the financial difference with other areas. We have not only cost of living problems, but we've got an onerous regulatory environment, and we've got a dilutive tax structure that makes it difficult to do manufacturing here. Is there anything that CNMI could do to help address that, or at least bring the problem to light at Sacramento?
You can see we all are volunteering to speak.
It's so true. There was we promote something called Next Generation Manufacturing Strategies within MEP NIST, which is, moving manufacturing to the next level beyond just continuous improvement and lean, because obviously you can't out-lean least cost countries. That didn't work in the 80s or 90s. So we work from front door to back door. But one of the things that's clear that comes out in every survey, even when it's not really asked, is the regulatory issues and the tax issues are a problem. So I was listening very closely to what Kish had to say, and he did touch on those elements. And all I can say is there is, in the efforts that we've done as an MEP to reach out to the state, there is a recognition, there's certainly a sensitivity to that, and there is a desire to change that. And I think, again, it's one of those snowballs on the hill that has to be worked and pushed downhill. GoBiz has a poster in their California office, in the state offices, that says we're open for business. So, that's the first. The mindset is the first step, and then the policy things are crucial. I too come from manufacturing. I was running a plant in Benicia and then Concord right before I left that company, and we sold it, and I joined MEP. So I understand that. Those pains completely. I actually sent some production to Milwaukee and sent some production to China, so I understand that completely. And my mission for the next 10 years is to turn that around, and everybody here would like to turn that around and to address that issue. So thanks for pointing that out, and I think that's very important.
I did notice, if we're going to deliver on our mission, part of it is the advocacy of manufacturing in the state, and getting more people to understand and focus on manufacturing. And I think with that will come the realization of multiple access points into policy. And right now there's an organization called CMTA. They do a very nice job of trying to affect policy in the state for manufacturing. We can certainly gather more data points for them. We can gather data points for the state assembly and legislature to talk to them. There is a lot of the state local representatives who are very, very interested in manufacturing. We have a few in Southern California. I'm sure you have a few up here. We have to talk to them, get them interested, because it is a bit of a grassroots thing we've got to start here. But I think, just like Gene says, once we get it rolling, I think the momentum of itself will move faster than we think.
And I would answer it one other way, too. One of the things that CNMI actually took on was the policy platform. Having to advocate and affect changes in those policy and regulatory environments. And one of the things that CNMI has done is to also collect in cities as part of its partners. You saw up there cities and counties, and we're working on the counties piece, but definitely the cities are in, and we hope Alameda County soon. The reality is that cities have the ability to interact with the legislative folks in a different environment, in a different way. And if we can become good voices for what's going on, that's yet another way, as Gene pointed out, that we'll be coming at this, this policy issue. So we hope that helps provide success. One more question, and then I think we're going to wrap up.
I think it's great what you're doing. I think it's going to be a long-term process. The snowball is a great example. And I'm in the design community, and our company does prototyping as well. And one of the things I found is that there's a paradigm problem. People believe all the manufacturing's gone. I know that's not true because I get a lot of things made here. But one of the things I've done through the Society of Manufacturing Engineers, you probably know them, is just arrange tours, pure awareness, and invite everybody I know, all 1,000 of my closest friends, on a monthly basis, 8 times a year, and say, just come on and see what they're doing. Wonderful companies like Intuitive Surgical, Extron, many others. We just tours, just awareness. Works great.
You're absolutely right. And I don't know, last fall, the MEP program had Manufacturing Day. And it's going to be done again this October, in which we're going to do a lot more planning, because it was piloted last year and it was so darn successful in getting state representatives, federal representatives, everybody to visit a manufacturing location to get it right from the individual who's running the organization. And they didn't pull any punches when they went in about the state. So we're going to do it again in October, and you'll see a lot of information coming out from both of the MEPs, both MANEX and CMTC, about it. And just so you know, we work on a fairly regular basis to get both federal and state representatives to visit manufacturing facilities. I mean, it's one of the things we find is great for the program. It's great for manufacturing, and it's really great for the congressional or state representative as well. They're more knowledgeable on manufacturing, and knowledge creates power, right, which will move us forward. And enthusiasm, for sure.
That's a good point. We, Jim and I were in Washington, D.C., and we visited the state congressional offices and the two senators, and on a bipartisan level, a tremendous support for manufacturing and policy changes that you point out that are needed. There's significant interest in manufacturing, and it's fascinating to see the interest level. And we got immediate requests for tours. in their district. They want to see what's there. They want to go out and tour the plants. And then the other thing about Manufacturing Day, some of the states that were really successful, they did the high schools. They did thousands of kids through these plants, and I think that's extremely important for the STEM education and raising that level of interest.
Before we ask Betsy to come and close us out, panelists, any last words that you might want to impart?
Out there, so if you're interested in what we've been talking about, Betsy will tell you how to sign up.
Okay. Great. With that, I'm going to wrap up, and I'm going to ask Betsy to come close us out and give us a call to action.
So I know we're getting to the end. I'm going to do this kind of quickly and give you my scan of the day, and then a couple of elements of call to action, what we think that we'd like to ask of you and what you might ask of us going forward. First thing I want to do is thank everybody, because I think this was an extremely interesting day and the beginning of mechanisms for collaboration that we're going to exercise for a lot of years to come. So let me go over two elements of the day that we saw. We started off with sort of, I'll call it philosophical discussions about additive manufacturing, going from aesthetics to functionality, from design to reality really quickly, from design for functionality to design for manufacturability. We talked and heard about a lot of very successful applications. There was some philosophical discussion repeatedly about whether additive manufacturing was going to supplant traditional manufacturing or not. I think these are fascinating discussions, and we'll look back in 3 years and figure out where we were right and where we were wrong. And I really look forward to that. The other thing we spent a lot of time hearing about was very functional, customization, speed. We heard about designer materials, scanning to 3D rendering, low-volume manufacturing, metrology, inspection methodologies, fixturing, feedstocks, really basic elements, and what's changing, how it can be thought about. The thing we heard a little bit about, but not a lot, I think we could hear more about, is talent, and talent development and talent use, talent acquisition, if you will. I'm going to tell you 4 or 5 bullets about what we heard from Kish Rajan right after lunch. He said we in California want to define manufacturing success for the country. I mean, he said that several times and he meant it. He said California is an innovation-based economy. Manufacturing is part of our state blueprint. It's our DNA. And what do we want to do to move forward? On their side, I think we heard from GoBiz that they're organizing a meeting in a week, and their goals are really to answer the president's call. So this is sort of an NNMI-focused meeting, which is not necessarily what we heard about at the end of the day. And they'd like to create statewide alignment. It is there that I think everybody is on the same page, that it is time for a variety of reasons to create statewide alignment across all the diverse assets of the state. So the last thing we heard about was the CNMI, which is forming to focus all of the state assets not on proposal calls, but on actually genuinely improving the state of manufacturing in the state of California, and in fact focusing on where we are strong in manufacturing, which is in small and medium-sized manufacturers. That is really what the state of manufacturing in the state of California is about. So in that context, we talked about innovation, energy and resource intensive commodities, things that are unique to California, universities, R&D laboratories, small and medium-sized manufacturers. We talked about advocacy and policy. So we really sort of laid on the table what are some of the basis vectors. Sorry, that's a little bit techie, but what are the bases for the conversation that brings all of the assets of California together? We talked a fair amount about tech transfer as both a linchpin for California manufacturing, certainly in the context of what the state is known for in innovation. That's absolutely true. And we talked a little bit about improving processes for tech transfer so that we actually can make real the ecosystem of universities and laboratories in the state, moving its ideas and creations out to small and medium-sized manufacturers. So let me give you a few, and these are really just thoughts on I'll call it a call to action. We certainly would really like for those of you who are who are interested in enlisting in this idea of bringing all of the assets together in a collaborative opportunity to join in with the CNMI. And I think there's a box out in the lobby. No? Well, let's just say we'll create a box out there for you to put your cards in. Certainly this panel, you can talk to any of those people, they're all still here, is available. If you feel like you're an early adopter, talk to us about how we might genuinely improve the processes for tech transfer. And I'll repeat some of the things that Jean said, we need repeatable, scalable processes. I think many of us feel like we don't necessarily have that, but we've just started on the path to create that. In large part, that will be direct, collaborative, problem solving between technology developers and small and medium-sized companies. We have to work that. And we are, I know all of the laboratories involved are really keenly interested in doing that. In general, that particular topic seems like it's a very interesting topic for the next CNMI workshop, maybe in the late fall timeframe. We're sort of thinking about that. I just thought I'd put that in your bonnets, that be in your bonnets, because it's a topic that comes up all the time and is worthy of a larger conversation. Finally, let us know if you have, so there's a meeting, as Kish Rajan said, in a week, a GoBiz, a governor's office sponsored meeting on state alignment. If you have ideas that would benefit you in terms of what statewide alignment looks like, I really encourage you to let somebody know and let us know, say this panel here, before then, what those ideas are, or how you think statewide alignment could benefit you. I think that's all I've got for calls to action at this point. We certainly are looking both for your enthusiastic participation and your ideas.